Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to dive into the entire process of how the web pages are rendered and how do we see everything on our browsers. How do we see those colors, pictures, images and everything. So have you ever wondered what happens when we type a URL into a web browser? But wait, before we dive deep into the rendering process, let's understand the basics. A web page is nothing but a mixture of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, HTML provides the structure, and the CSS gives the style to it. And what's the job of JavaScript now? So, JavaScript adds the interactivity, wherein we can click, we can scroll, hover, and everything. So when you enter a URL and hit or type a URL into the web browser, just the magic begins there. So by the end of this video, you'll understand how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript collaborate in laying the foundation of rendering the web pages. We'll also have some insights into the behind the scene of the internet. We'll also see the DOM manipulation, how DOM actually architects the web structure, how JavaScript interactions takes place, how the stylings, fonts, and the layouts are taken care of, how the calculation happens, and how at the end we get to see this beautiful picture or the pixel perfect panes on our browser rendering the web pages. Let's get started. First, we'll have a look on the request response cycle and DNS resolution. Now, what is all this? Let's say when we type a URL, a browser sends request to the server hosting a website. Now, this process includes resolving the DNS, which converts the human readable domain into an IP address. And once this request is resolved, the server responds with necessary files, which are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, setting the stage for rendering. So, when the browser receives an HTML document, it goes through a process called parsing. So, during parsing, the HTML document is broken into this hierarchical structure known as document object model. Now comes tokenization and lexing. I know it might sound like a jargon, but I'll just explain you in brief. So, HTML document is tokenized and lexed, which means it's broken down into individual pieces or tokens. So, these tokens represents different elements, attributes, or text content in the HTML. And this is how the DOM tree construction takes place. The browser uses these tokens or elements to build a tree-like structure, which represents the parent to child to grandchild kind of relationship. And each HTML element becomes a node in the DOM tree. So this is how the node creation takes place. Parent to child relationships are established, and once the parsing and construction process is complete, you have a fully formed DOM tree that represents the structure of HTML document. Now, if there are script elements in the HTML document, they may execute and further manipulate the DOM. So dynamic changes also takes place as the user interact with the web page as a script modify the content dynamically. Now let's talk about executing JavaScript and interactions with HTML. So first of all, JavaScript is a language that brings interactivity to your web pages. When a script tag is encountered during HTML parsing, the parsing is immediately paused and the JavaScript code is executed. Here's one thing to note. If your JavaScript is inside the head of your HTML file, it may try to interact with elements that haven't been passed yet, which leads to conflicts or errors. So to avoid this issue, it's a preferred and good practice to include your JavaScript at the end of the body tag, or maybe use async or defer kind of attributes. In here, the defer keyword ensures that HTML content is passed before JavaScript is executed, which prevents potential conflicts. If you want to know more about this execution order, considering the attributes like async, defer, so I'll make another video on that. But I hope you understood this execution context of JavaScripts. Like whenever the script tag appears or is encountered by the during the parsing of the HTML, it is going to be executed unless you provide a defer and an async event, because this kind of supports asynchronous execution. Next comes CSS parsing and creating CSS object model. So while HTML is being parsed, the browser also encounters CSS style sheets. So the CSS parser processes these style sheets and create the CSS object model. Now this tree represents the styles applied to each and every element on the page. This CSS object model supports in style calculations and layout rendering. With the DOM and CSS object model, along with the JavaScript executed, uh, it's time to calculate the style for each and every DOM element. Now the browser combines the document object model and CSS object model, determining the final computed style, which considers how the elements have been structured, who's the parent, who's the child, what is the priority we have given to the CSS classes and the CSS rules. Now comes the moment where we have been building up to. We have created the ingredients now. Now we'll just quickly make the recipe. So with the DOM and CSS OM, and the JavaScript executed, the render tree is built. Render tree is nothing but a combination of DOM and CSS OM. It contains only the elements needed to be displayed onto the page. Some elements might be hidden or excluded if they don't contribute to the final layout. Next comes the painting phase. So once the layout and the layout from the DOM and styling from the CSS is calculated, the browser goes through a painting phase where it fills in the pixels to create this visual representation of the page onto the screen. The painting process involves drawing the content, backgrounds, borders, and other visual aspects to an element. So this composite layer is formed. Modern browsers usually use hardware acceleration or optimization performance by using the composite layer. So after the painting, the rendered content is displayed on the screen, creating the visual representation of the web pages. And there you have it, the entire process of how web pages are rendered, from the request response cycle to creation of render tree and the critical steps of parsing HTML, executing JavaScript, and crafting of CSS on before the final layout and painting. It's an amazing journey. So understanding these steps will ensure your web page's functionality very smoothly. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe my YouTube channel for more content. Thanks for joining me today. See ya.